Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton, and my co-host, Mr. Earl Boske, where we review the big stories making news each and every week. The weekend papers will start there. The Voice newspaper, packed mass weekend. Carnival director pleased with season. The Star newspaper, criminal deportees, a major headache, whether 600, 800 or thousands. And will October deliver a reduced VAT? And of course, a very interesting back page photograph, bottoms up, Carnival reference here. The Mirror newspaper, time for reform. Governor General lays down the gauntlet for a culture of change. And of course, we have the usual inserts from the Star and the Voice newspaper in the Yo magazine, featuring Tennyson John and Euphoria. This midget is really a giant. Sports and health from the Star newspaper and the Tonight magazine. Obviously, a focus on Carnival. We are in the midst of the Carnival season. Where do you want to start? We want to start with the Carnival or with the Prime Minister's latest bout of foot-and-mouth disease?
Well, they sound like two Carnival related topics. In fact, I'll start with your first time I saw you doing Street Vibes. Was it about what was the topic again?
Carnival, whether it was still a creative expression of our culture,
or people found that it should have been more 12, but it's more puel. Too much puel. Now, the emphasis on sexiness or the overemphasis on skimpy wear is something that has, depending on who's talking, either plagued or helped Carnival for quite some time. And what happens is that every season we have a repeat of the same old arguments. They become more sophisticated. The taglines change, you know, the arguments change, but at the end of the day, it amounts to the big question as to whether, what is Carnival, what was it meant to be, what is it today, and is it today what it was meant to be? Somebody complained correctly, why should Carnival be referred to as Vaval? Now, if somebody is referring to Carnival as Vaval, like the person said, I grew up knowing Vaval as Ash Wednesday, when all costumes are taken down to Queen's Lane or Shitali, depending on how you describe it, to be burnt. The ashes from which were traditionally taken to the church and applied on your forehead on Ash Wednesday. That was what Vaval. So Vaval was more the negative in terms of the destruction of the creativity, but the spiritually positive conclusion of Carnival. But then when the opening of Carnival, you start hearing about Vaval, it's either people don't know what it is meant, or as we normally do in today's modern world, turn things, you know, on their head. At the end of the day, is Carnival today what it should be today? There is the argument that we have run out of the creativity of band rooms, mass camps, you know, where costumes are created and made locally. Is that on the way back?
But who dictates whether it is where it should be? Who dictates what it should be?
Well,
is culture static or is it dynamic? Is it evolving?
What's the yardstick?
Exactly.
Is it the people participating, or the people viewing, or a combination of both? What is the cost of participation today? There was a big discussion somewhere yesterday about people taking loans to purchase Carnival costumes and being unable to take other loans to purchase school books and children's uniforms. The argument about mass camps and steel band and Carnival being what it used to be is rebuffed by those who say, listen, we're moving on. So why do you want to go back to steel band when the the hi-fi, I almost said the Wi-Fi, when the hi-fi will soon go Wi-Fi anyway. But you know, the counter arguments. But my thing is, as with elections, these very important discussions and arguments only take place at Carnival time. They should be taking place between Carnival. between carnivals. We don't sufficiently discuss between carnivals where we want our carnival to be. We seem to be more concerned about ensuring there is at least $1 million for carnival.
Yeah, but isn't that the direction that we were heading in when we established the CPMA, a Caribbean Carnival Planning and Management Agency that would function throughout the year, marketing carnival and developing carnival as a business, or balancing the cultural aspect and the business aspect of it?
For the start of carnival this year, has it been replaced? Because I can recall the committee you're talking about either having resigned, or I could remember them.
That's after the election.
Yeah, after the election. Was
yeah,
but
Leonard Montoud said that they were happy with what was in place for Carnival 2016, so they were going ahead.
Okay.
Now, what happens after that? How soon do you appoint a new board, or you keep the existing one? How soon do you start work on the next Carnival?
For the last decade, what I've observed, subject to welcome correction, is that after every election there's a review of the last after every carnival, there's a review of this year's carnival, and some ideas come up for next year's carnival, but next year's carnival starts being planned after jazz. Or just around jazz time, so that we go from season to season. And I think the fact that we have so many festive seasons, at least one per month, and some months having more than one, is that we tend to get locked into preparations for the various seasons, rather than putting all the seasons in a bouillon and deciding, listen, we'll plan for the year. If we plan for the year, then the sort of festivals commission we've heard about would bring all of the elements of our festivities, our cultural festivities together. So at the start of the year, we have a calendar of activities, a calendar of cultural activities, which is akin to the Creole month activities, or the jazz season activities. You always get a calendar from beginning to end. Hopefully, we'll sooner than later see a calendar, an annual calendar of creative festive activities.
What I would like to see is, I mean, we normally use Trinidad as the gauge to measure our carnival against. Trinidad's costumes are unveiled a whole year in advance, and carnival is a big business over there. I would like to see us get to that point, of course, retaining our own unique, cultural identity. But then again, as you said, how diluted is that cultural identity? Panorama last night, we only had 5 bands. You hear the complaints, is Pan dying? The association has claimed to have submitted proposals to the Ministry of Culture. No feedback. We only had 5 bands this year. People are complaining about the pans, so the bands don't have enough time or room to rehearse.
We hardly make positive comments. We hardly say things were nice. We're in that mentality. We're of that mentality that we view things searching for mistakes. But
the point is that if we're talking about preserving the cultural aspect, Pan is one of the last remaining truly cultural aspects of Carnival, but it's dying.
Yeah, but sponsors tell me there's too many people to sponsor. Cost is too much.
And the band say their cost of just maintaining the band is too much.
Yeah, so
and then when they get the prize money, it doesn't even cover the cost.
So they find themselves in the back of the line. We're due for a break.
You're right. We're due for a break. So let's take it. When we come back, we'll shift our focus, talk about some of the other stories making news this week. You're watching the Press Club. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Press Club. Let's shift our focus to another story making the news this week. The headline story of the Star newspaper: whether 600, 800 or thousands, criminal deportees a major headache. The page 15 story in the Star newspaper, a reference to statements made by Prime Minister Alan Shastney during an interview with the Nation newspaper in Barbados, claiming that the U.S. was dumping hundreds, well, to be more precise, 800 criminal deportees in 1 year, and referring to the cut or the dip in U.S. security funding to the region. Since then, he has come under some pressure from the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party as well as the United States State Department, which has refuted the claims made by him and issued some of their own statistics to set the matter correct. The Star newspaper here is suggesting that did Lacob's goof before Allen goofed, referencing an earlier statement by Philip Lacobnia, the former National Security Minister, where he described deportees as trained criminals, and he said he was sure some of these deportees have international links to be where it is to ISIS or other bodies or agencies. And the question asked on the cover of the Star newspaper, whether 600, 800 or thousands criminal deportees are a major headache.
I think this
flashing mirrors, distractions.
The headline is a diversion from the reality of the point that the Prime Minister made a misrepresentation. The question is, I would hate to think that he made a deliberate misrepresentation. I would rather believe he didn't know what the real figure was. But having said so, having made that declaration in Barbados before or after, on the same day of meeting the U.S. ambassador and declaring that as a consequence of his meeting with the U.S. ambassador, he can foresee relations between St. Lucia and Washington being very well.
Not if you make statements like that.
You don't make statements like that before or after, whether it was on the doorstep.
Yeah, but one of the reporters asked him, the reporter asked him, is that figure for St. Lucia? And he said, correct. If my memory serves me correct. She asked him 2 questions and he said, correct. So it wasn't a mistake.
It wasn't a mistake. He felt he was right. And to now suggest that it doesn't matter whether the Prime Minister was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the U.S. has clarified and has certainly pointed out that the highest number of refugees, deportees sent back to St. Lucia has been 10, and that last year, in the last few years, it has ranged between 5 and 8. So it has never even been anywhere near a dozen. So to suggest that it is near 1,000, which is 800, that defies the question in the Star as to it doesn't matter how many, whether it is 1 or 2, once we have criminal deportees. Bringing in the ex-Attorney General into the story is again a further
Ex-Home
diversion.
Affairs,
Yeah, because there's no relationship between what the former Attorney General said and what the Prime Minister has said. I don't know whether the Star has made any reference to the fact that the opposition issued a statement on the issue. So I think the Star is responding to the efforts by the opposition to continue to identify the Prime Minister as someone who tends to tell less than the truth more often than not, and too often to be himself comfortable about. And that's the reality. The Prime Minister simply has to understand that he is going to command as much attention as Kenny Anthony did as Prime Minister. He's the Prime Minister now. The focus of attention is going to be on him. His every word is going to be quoted. His every action is going to be watched. And he simply has to be more careful. Let's look at Britain. The new British Prime Minister has appointed Boris Johnson to be the Foreign Affairs Minister equivalent of the United Kingdom. This is a fellow with a dirty tongue. He's attacked everybody from President Obama to President Putin to Hillary Clinton. He says people from Cameroon are criminals. He was a journalist covering the EU, and they had all sorts of problems with his coverage and all of that. But at the end of the day, what you have is that Boris Johnson, as the promoter, the main promoter of Brexit, has been made the chief diplomat of the United Kingdom. Yeah, he cannot but clean his tongue.
That's what you wanted. You know, but how do you take somebody who is known now for such undiplomatic language and put him in a the highest diplomatic position.
I think it's the thing to do. Remember, it was him and Michael Gove who led the Brexit campaign. She's shown Michael Gove the door, gotten rid of him. But Johnson was about to involuntarily retire into nothingness, you know, and he's the man who put Britain where it is today. So she says to him, hey, you put us where we are. Come out of retirement, go sell Brexit to the world. I have an article in today's Voice called Who Better to Sell Brexit Than Mr. Brexit Himself. And I think it's a masterstroke by her. Put him there. If he doesn't clean his tongue, whether he cleans it or not, the French foreign minister has already called him a liar. The EU people in Brussels have said he's the worst thing that the world has ever seen. And at the end of the day, he is either going to have to adjust or the world is going to reject him, in which case, what would you do as Theresa May? Show him the door.
Yeah.
So I think that's what she's up to.
Yeah. But before we move on, I don't want to dismiss the Star's headline. Whether 6, 8, 100 or 1,000 criminal deportees are a major headache. Where the Star stopped short was going further back. When Guy Mears was National Security Minister, he expressed similar sentiments as those, concern about the U.S. immigration laws, now the British immigration stance, you know, and what it meant for us. It also points to the fact that we still have a lot of work to do in terms of reforming and improving the justice system. How do we get the remand population down? How do we reduce the overcrowding at border? How serious are we taking alternative sentencing, you know, community service, house imprisonment?
Some of that we're starting to see. We started to see towards the end of the previous administration where a special judge was appointed with the specific objective of reducing the population at border. The DPP's office started to work on reducing the number of cases soon after the famous French case of the French guy. That has been used in many instances. We now know that the case backlog has been reduced by over 300. That didn't happen in 1 week, you know, or in 2 weeks, but it is a significant departure from what it was under the previous Director of Public Prosecutions to what it is now under the present acting or Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. We're seeing a difference. In terms of the criminal aspect, the danger being referred to by the Star, when you read the U.S. statement, they are saying, listen, it's not that we are just dumping criminals on you. Every member state, every country that is a member of the International Civil Aviation Authority or organization, ICAO, you are duty bound to accept any citizen or national of your country that lands on your airport. And it is on that basis that the U.S. is sending the deportees to the various countries, because every CARICOM member state, including St. Lucia, belongs to the ICAO. So it is that law which the U.S. is using. It is not a bilateral agreement which says Washington and Castries have agreed that Castries is going to receive all criminals from the U.S. without St. Lucia being able to deport American criminals who may commit similar acts in St. Lucia. So that is where we have to look at the crux of the matter. Read the details. And the U.S. is saying clearly is that, number one, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia did not speak the truth about the number of persons coming per year. And number two, he also alleged that the U.S. had reduced its security assistance to St. Lucia and the region, and the U.S. Embassy was also able to show that that too was inaccurate, because rather than reduce the number, the amount had been increased by a third.
Yeah. How much of that are we getting? We're still not part of the RSS, still not able to function within the RSS training exercises because the U.S. has barred us from participating in any funded activities by the government.
Home Affairs and National Security Minister accompanied the Prime Minister to Barbados to those meetings with the U.S. Ambassador, and he too has said that based on the discussions, he can see smooth sailing insofar as impacts and all of these things are concerned. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, we're due for another break. Let's take the break. When we come back, we'll shift our focus to some international developments. You're watching Press Club. Welcome back. Let's shift our focus now to the United States, where elections, they're gearing up for elections in November. Interesting developments over there. Both parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, are scheduled to have major conferences this weekend or this week. Of course, in light of what's happened in terms of the police killings, the subsequent demonstrations and riots, security concerns are high. Also in light of what happened in Paris, France, another subject that we can touch on before we run out of time. There's some interesting statistics coming out over the media this week. The New York Times is reporting that although it seems, and they've been announcing her as the presumptive candidate for the Democratic Party in the person of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, who is expected to announce his vice presidential candidate. Yes. Yeah, I didn't get that part.
Michael Pence.
Polls have come out to show that across the board, in both the Republican and the Democratic Party, most of the persons polled, and that poll was done via cell phones and landlines over the last couple of weeks, both sets of party members and supporters are unhappy with either of the candidates. We had a poll, there was an interview with one of the history professor, and he was saying, you know, almost by default, I mean, that's who the party has selected, is going to vote for him. But if he had another option, he wouldn't go that route. There are a number of historic developments that we can expect as this election unfolds, that being one of them. We're looking at Trump turning 70, likely to be, if he is elected, the oldest president ever voted in. Hillary Clinton is 69. I think she'll turn 70 later this year. So if that happens, she'll also be the second oldest president inaugurated. But a number of historic developments as far as this election is concerned. But from your perspective, as you've been following the coverage, how do you see it panning out?
I thought Ronald Reagan was the oldest.
Yeah, he was until now.
We're looking for a new oldest.
Right. I think he was when he was 69, right?
He was, I don't know what he was.
I think he was 69. Yeah,
I've known him for, I'm sure I've known
as an actor
for more than 69 years.
Yeah, but I think he was 69. Yeah. I stand to be corrected, but I think he was 69.
I think that the fact that the two parties are having their conventions this weekend is more in keeping with tradition and you know, what is expected to be done. Done a reflection of where the parties are thinking. There is absolutely no doubt that Donald Trump is going to be the Republican candidate. There's absolutely no doubt that the traditional media and the establishment in the United States had supported Hillary Clinton from day one, even when it was being shown that Bernie Sanders had a better chance of beating Donald Trump in terms of national polls earlier on in the campaign. And that having the presence of Bernie Sanders has had a very serious effect on Hillary Clinton's campaign. It has forced her to direct her campaign in areas that she would not normally have gone. He has been able to extract from her certain promises, had her to insert in her proposals certain things that he would like to see, not all of what he wanted, but bearing in mind the convention coming and the pressure being put on him by the Democratic establishment, remembering that he's an independent and not a registered, you know, Democratic inner circle candidate. The pressure was put on him. He eventually, depending on who's speaking, he agreed to support her, or he capitulated as some of his supporters who booed at the rally when he made the announcement. But at the end of the day, he took a sensible decision. Establishment America was not behind him. we have a situation where the point where you were making about the supporters of neither party being satisfied with the selection, it shows again that in these major parties in these countries, what you have is that the establishment within the party itself runs the show and not the party support base. You look at Britain, where Jeremy Corbyn, who is the Labour leader who got the most votes among the membership ever in history, there's a coup being planned, and a slow motion coup being planned and implemented against him by the MPs, Labour MPs, who want to remove him from being their leader in the House as a first part to get rid of him as leader of the party. Now, the rank and file don't have a say in that vote, and the party leadership had to insist that he be on the ballot. When we go back to the United States, the Republican mainstream and everybody was against Trump from day one, but he had the support of working class white America particularly, and others, and his establishment people. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are now, I think, one of the reasons why people feel the way the poll found that they're dissatisfied is because what they're saying is that the party establishments are writing the rules and bending the rules to suit themselves, to choose the candidates who they will have chosen from the beginning in the campaign. So that the rules were written and applied in a way to prevent independents from being able to support Bernie Sanders, because something said as an independent you would have to register a year in advance. So with all of that behind them now, they're heading to the campaign, to the vote in November, and there was a necessity to close ranks. The question is whether, as a result of what you've just pointed out, what effect that is going to have, whether those people, whether the majority of Democrats are going to say, all right, I mean those who feel that way, whether the majority of those who would not have chosen Clinton would go and vote for her in order to keep Trump out. Trump is already courting them by saying to them, listen, if you're dissatisfied with the way Hillary treated Bernie, come over on my side. And he did announce his vice presidential candidate is Michael Pence, the governor of one of the states, who selected not to run for governor again in order to be available to be Trump's running mate. So it's very clear that there was some discussion taking place. You got it there?
No, New York Times newspaper. It says Mrs. Clinton still leads an average, in a dead heat right now, I think about 40%. Mrs. Clinton still leads in averages of recent polls, though her margin has narrowed since late June. The latest Times CBS News poll could be an indication of an even tighter race, yet Mr. Trump has not led a national poll that meets the Times polling standards since mid-May, just after he won enough delegates to secure the Republican nominations. I think that kind of partially answers your question, does it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And while the race may be narrow, the gloom appears broad. And it goes on to interview some people on their reasons for feeling the way they do about...
Yeah, the goalpost has slightly shifted on both sides. Trump is going into a convention where he is disliked by most of the major players in the Republican Party, but they have had no choice but to stick with him because he has run out all of the other... or he run out the competition.
But you think that will be a factor in the November poll, because the Republican Party seems to be very divided, while as much as people are dissatisfied with Hillary Clinton, the Democratic Party seems to be gelling.
Yeah, well, that would be one of the things that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats would be playing on, the widening gap between in the ranks in the Republicans, and I think it's as a result of that Trump is trying to do the same to the Democrats by saying, hey, if you don't like Hillary, just vote for me. You know, he's trying to appeal to working class, white, non-traditional Republican people, and I haven't seen a poll which has measured to what extent Sanders supporters who are infuriated about him capitulating, as they put it, to Hillary Clinton, whether they would be sufficiently enraged to go and support Trump. I suspect that they might quicker end up being no votes, or deciding to take a mature position that, you know, understand what Sanders is saying. Listen, at the end of the day, we don't want Trump. So whether it's him or Hillary, it doesn't matter. Support Hillary. He will work with her. Who knows? She might make him her vice presidential candidate. She might do an Obama.
Yeah, who knows?
You never know.
We'll see how that develops. We'll do for another break. Our last one. When we come back, we'll focus on the attacks in Paris. In Nice, sorry. Welcome back. Before we end, we have to talk about what happened in Paris this week, the attack in Nice, where they were celebrating the Bastille Day on a promenade. Obviously, promenade suggests it shut off the traffic, and a truck was able to barrel through, mow down, at last count, 84 people died. Several others are fighting for their life. I don't have the updated numbers before me. But
15 critical conditions still.
Yeah, a very serious attack, the third major attack on France. We had the Charlie Hebdo attack in January 2015. We had the other one in November, and now we have this one. Are you seeing a pattern evolving here? Is Paris or France or Nice being targeted?
I like the way you put it. A truck mowed down. You saw somebody had a remote control driving the truck through the crowd. There was a guy driving that truck.
Who eventually got shot by police.
Yeah, and it was a truck full of explosives. They found 2 rifles and grenades in the cabin.
Yeah, so the casualties could have been
much
higher.
Shot. So the casualties could have been much higher.
And it's still not certain whether he acted alone or whether he had accomplices.
They're now saying, the last I read, the French National Security Ministry was saying in the last how they say this news blast I got, is that they have 5 persons in custody who they are questioning about possible involvement. So on the one hand, they are admitting it could have been part of a plan. The one trend I see evolving, as you correctly pointed out, is yes, France is a target, because while countries around the world are being targeted, have all seen aspects of that, including the United States with the Orlando gay club massacre. You look at European states, you look at Turkey, which is again in a boiling cauldron as we speak, and you see that ISIS is an entity that has no place of abode and has no headquarters and has no standing army, but professes to have soldiers, foot soldiers in every country in the world, who are sleepers, who can be awoken without an alarm clock, and who have been told to just wake up and do it in our name. And I think the major states that have become victims, in this case France, but also the United States, they tend, when these things happen, including the bombings of planes flying to Egypt, immediately, the immediate reaction is always to try and make it appear not to be terrorist related, make it appear not to be ISIS related. So the first news about the driver of that vehicle was that he was a petty criminal, Tunisian born but resident in France. So 2 things are said there. 1, he's a criminal, and 2, he wasn't born in France. So he's an immigrant and a petty criminal. But it turns out, just before coming here, I got another blast. ISIS has claimed responsibility. And as in the case with the gay club massacre, the first efforts was to say, well, this guy was a lone gunman, you know, a gay Muslim who are not many, but you know, they have reasons other than terrorism, and describing them as homegrown, home cultivated. So in the first response is always to try to make it not appear that the terrorists and ISIS have hit us again, but it always ends up with ISIS being able to say that person was working for us, and the states not being able to prove that that is not true.
Yeah, but then ISIS is achieving a victory of sorts by doing that, because they, in most cases, the assailant is dead. He can't deny that he's a member of ISIS. So it further spreads the terror the rest of the world.
Well, you notice when it came to the guy who shot, who killed the 11 police officers in Dallas, he wasn't accused of being ISIS because he was an American soldier, a trained American soldier who served in Afghanistan. And the point I was making, you will have thousands like him, black, white, Indian, mulatto, of all sorts of racial backgrounds, who return to the United States with the post-traumatic stress you know, disorder syndrome, feeling not sufficiently appreciated for the tasks, the risks they took in Vietnam, in Iraq and Afghanistan and wherever else. Uncle Sam is saying, we paid you to take the risks. They're saying, listen, you know, we have represented our countries and we've come back hurt, we've come back sick, we've come back affected, and we're not getting jobs, we're not getting the treatment we need. And in that case, this guy is saying, listen, I want to kill white people for the way in which white policemen are killing black people.
But how much of what is happening in Paris, or in France, I keep saying Paris, in France, is tied to what's happening in Syria, you know, and to what extent does France and the rest of Europe, the EU, blame the United States for the current situation that they're facing? Because going into the last meeting on trip to Paris, to Europe, Obama was very unpopular, you know, again because of you mentioned the refugees, the influx of refugees to the EU, as a result of what's happening in Syria, as a result of what's happening in Libya and Iraq.
So much so that he found the Dallas killings enough to cut short his trip to the rest of his trip to Europe, because after Brussels he was due to go to either Spain or Italy to address issues. But the amount of booze he got, you know, in Brussels, and he decided to go back. Not to say that it wasn't sufficient reason to go back, but it was days after the killings.
Yeah, but at least in this case, Boris, I think, was justified in calling him a hypocrite, because for a long time, for a large part of his presidency, Europe took a back burner, you know, took a back seat. His focus was on China and other issues, you know, and they felt that he wasn't aggressive enough in dealing with Iraq, aggressive enough with Syria.
That's why Boris said his first order of duty will be to let the United States president know that as the new foreign minister of Britain, he's going to take the front line when it comes to repairing Britain's position with the United States.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Mr. Bousquet, always a pleasure. Thanks for being here. Thank you for viewing.
As always.
We'll be back here next week, hopefully, God willing, and so will you. And we can review some of the other stories making the news in this coming week. Until then, have yourselves a safe and enjoyable weekend. It's Carnival, parade on Monday and Tuesday, lots of activities happening in between. Panorama last night, we have the Calypso finals tonight. We have Groovy and Soca Monarch on Sunday, and lots of activities in between. So remember, if you're driving, don't drink. If you're drinking, don't drive. Stay safe.